Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk on your favorite channel, Huda TV. I'm your host, Arkham Rashid. On tonight's episode, we will be speaking about institutional racism. Is it a fact or fiction? Does it actually exist? So let's start off as usual by getting to know our panel for today. On my right hand side, sir, if you can introduce yourself, give us your name and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Rayyan Arab. I am a presenter of some programs on Huda TV, and I'm glad I was invited to this program tonight with one of our favorite presenters, Brother Arqam. I live in Saudi Arabia. I'm half Saudi, half American. I have lived in New York, Long Island for 3 years, studied high school over there. And I am currently the head of the expatriates in Saudi Arabia of the Islamic Education Foundation.
All right, Mr. Rayyan, it's wonderful to have you on the show. It's my first time with you live in the studio. I've actually done a program with you, or coverage from Hajj, I believe it was, but you were in Saudi Arabia and I was here in the studio in Cairo. So now it's going to be wonderful having this conversation live here.
Inshallah.
Brother next to him, can we get your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself? Go ahead, inshallah.
Mohammed Ital. I'm from the UK originally, and I'm currently studying Arabic amongst other sciences in Egypt.
In Egypt, and how are you finding Egypt compared to
Alhamdulillah.
the UK?
Alhamdulillah, Dunya.
Dunya, is it? All right, if we can come over to this side, brother, if we can get your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead, inshallah.
My name is Idris. I'm living here in Cairo now from America, studying Arabic, memorizing Quran, and teaching English also as a form of work.
All right, Idris, it's always wonderful having you on, and usually I do my Let's Talk program with you in my panel anyway,
Yes.
and we have wonderful discussions, so once again, it's wonderful.
Always a pleasure to come.
Brother next to him, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Patrick. I'm from Slovenia. I came to Egypt because of my studies. I'm studying management sciences in MSA, and I've been living in Egypt for 10 years now, and I'm also studying Islam here.
Okay,
And
all right. So how are you liking Egypt in comparison to your home country?
well, there's some things are better here and some things are better there, but I like it, to be honest. I'm thinking to stay here. Yes.
Really? Okay. Well, you've been here 10 years, so now you're just a local now.
Yeah, exactly.
Honorary Egyptian.
Yeah.
All right, Patrick, once again, it's wonderful to have you on, and this is the first time I'm doing Let's Talk with you here in my panel, inshallah. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Inshallah.
So, inshallah, if we can start with you, Rayyan, if you can tell us, in your opinion, do you think institutional racism actually exists? Is it there? Is it so prevalent in countries and in governments? What's your thoughts on this?
Well, from a background of mixed cultures, half Saudi, half American, and living in the United States for 3 years, I could agree that institutional racism does exist, and to be precise, we should define institutional racism, and that is hidden or non-apparent racism within an organization or an institution. I have witnessed it, me being half Saudi. My last name is Arab. So when I moved to the States back in 2002, after the incidents of 9/11, I did face some racism in high school. People would ask me, what's your name? Now I have 2 passports. One is Rayyan and another one is Ryan. Yeah, I have 2 names also. One is Rayyan and one is Ryan. So I have 2 identities. But the last name, I can't escape from that. That is Arab. So when I went to the States, they would ask me, what's your name? I would say like, Ryan. Ryan what? Arab? Oh, he's an Arab. So I did suffer institutional racism a lot, not a little bit. And another point I would like to mention is that being from 2 different countries gives the citizens of each country an opportunity to see me with a different image. When I go to Saudi Arabia, they see me as a foreigner. And when I go to America, they see me as a foreigner. So I am suffering a lot.
So you belong to no land then.
Yeah.
No, that's quite interesting. We can get your insights on the 2 different countries, inshallah, further on into this conversation. Mamadou, if I can come to you, what's your thoughts on institutional racism, especially in the UK? Do you think it's really prevalent there?
I think it's really prevalent in the UK, but I would add to that, the way the UK British people are, they're very subtle in the racism. As in, you won't find the contrast between America and the US. I mean, America and the UK is completely different. Some of the stuff that is said on the TV in the States could never get said on the UK television. However, it affects you subtly. So in policy, in housing, in the judiciary, all these things are affected by institutional racism. So it definitely exists.
Okay, if I'm going to come over to this side, Idris, what's your thoughts on this? And give us a little bit of insight about the U.S., land of the free, home of the brave.
I think in the U.S. it's very prevalent, and it became something that was a form of way of keeping on holding on to this racism by certain individuals when they weren't allowed to be open with it. So it became sort of behind the door type thing. Nowadays, it's sort of coming out a little bit more open than it was during, let's say, the 90s and the early 2000s. But things changed back and forth. Of course, legally, it's still racism is against the law, so they can't do anything as far as to your face. Like if you apply for a job, I can't say I'm not hiring you because you're black. That sets me up for a huge lawsuit, and I can. And we have lawsuits that happen like that. For instance, there's a Muslim sister who sued a store in America because they didn't want her to wear hijab. They said it didn't fit the image they wanted because they're sort of a surfer-like, Caucasian-like white store. It didn't fit their image. They hired her, and then they let her go afterwards. So she actually took it, and it went pretty far, I think all the way up to the higher court, and she actually won it. So.
But okay, just taking that case as an example, what's your thoughts on that? Don't you think a company should have the right to choose who they hire?
They should have the right to choose who they hire based upon a fair standard, not necessarily a standard that someone has no choice over. For instance, I didn't choose to be black. So you shouldn't judge me on something that I have no choice over. It should be over your knowledge, your behavior, your communication skills, something that's relevant to the work you're doing. Whether something that has nothing to do with the work you're doing.
Okay, so. That's a very good answer there. Brother, if we can go to you, inshallah, Patrick, what's your thoughts on this, and tell us a little bit about institutional racism in Slovenia?
Yeah, well, when I was in Slovenia, when I was back there, I was really young. I was a child. I was from 6 to 11, so I didn't really understand the term racism. But now when I think about it and I look back at my life, and actually yes, there is. Because I think I was in the fifth grade, and we had a new student. He was fresh, and he was a little bit darker than the rest of us, because we were all white, and he was dark. So I didn't see. Of course, there was racism between the kids, because they were he was new, and we never saw him before, and it was new. But I would notice that teachers used to give him a hard time just because he didn't know the language. There was this thing that he didn't know the Slovenian language much. So if we would get asked 5 questions, he would be asked 7, or 8, or they would give him extra work. Or I know that these 3 teachers back then. Now I think about it, and yes, there's a lot of institutional racism, not only in schools, but even in healthcare. When I go now with my stepdad, he's a bit darker. And when he goes to a hospital, the doctors, they treat him differently than they would treat me. They give him strange looks, and there's this thing in the air. You can feel it, but nothing's there to actually have a solid proof that there's racism going on. But if you're there, if you're present there, you can feel it. So yes, there is institutional
and that's one of the worst things about institutional racism, is that there's no individual person carrying out that sort of discrimination. Rather, it's an accepted sort of racism or discrimination within an institute, whether it's a government body, or whether it's just a social institution, and it becomes the accepted thing. So if somebody sees somebody discriminating, it just carries on. Nobody would say anything. Now, we want to look at some of the causes of this. What would you say are some of the causes? Idris, if we can start with you.
For me, I guess the causes would be mostly education. And experiencing other people and learning about other people. I often use this example when I tell people that it's good for you to learn other cultures, not because you want to believe what they believe, but you want to understand them. And I give my students some of the examples of, say, for instance, how us Muslims, we make wudu, we wash, and sometimes when you're anywhere, you go into the bathroom, you're washing. If you haven't washed your feet, you might have to wash your feet in the sink. So I tell them, imagine an American coming into the bathroom. They don't know anything about Muslims. They don't know anyone, and they walk in, they see you with your foot in the sink. The first thing they're going to think is this person homeless? Why are you washing in the public bathroom? So, but if they knew about Muslims and their culture and things, it wouldn't be a shock to them. They would understand it more. A lot of times people don't understand because they don't even know anything about the other person. So they tend to believe in like bigotry and prejudice and things that are like come to them through movies and other means. Oh, all those people are like this. All those people are like this. And they tend to stereotype it and believe it. So I think it's one of the main causes is education.
Yeah, and I think there is a difference between understanding and knowing, because, for example, to know that somebody does something doesn't mean that you necessarily understand it. Because when you understand it, you try to make things easier for him, or you try to help him in any way that you can. So if you know that Muslims put their feet in the sink, for example, doesn't mean that you'll accept it, doesn't mean that you'll help them, doesn't mean that it won't be an issue. That's just knowing. But when you understand where they're coming from, why they do it, that's the difference. Because once you understand why people do things, then you will try to make it easier for them, because you have things that you do and you would like for them to understand as well. So it goes both ways.
Yes.
Patrick, if we can come to you, what do you think are some of the causes of institutional racism?
Yes, I most definitely would agree with Idris here. It's education, and mostly because most of the things that when I'm still young, I don't have that much experience, but mostly is the media and what you see on TV, because that's what we do as kids. All we do is like we watch TV, we do our homework, and we play video games. Because this is what moves us as children. But what the problem is, what we see on TV when we're growing up, when your mind's you're still young, so your brain's still, there's a lot of information to gather from different places, and when you see what's going on TV, you kind of start stereotyping without even knowing, like these people are like this and these people are like this. Without even knowing it, you could be doing it yourself, and you would and because of the media and because what is going on around you, you would think that is normal. Like you're doing the thing that everyone else is doing, and it becomes something as normality. I think that's wrong, because if you want to know someone, you need to know what's underneath, not how they look like, because everyone's different and nobody's the same.
Okay, and before I move to this side of the panel, I just wanted to share two of my thoughts of why, or what are some of the causes. I think the first is the propaganda through the media, and this is probably the most important way that institutionalized racism is spread. And the second is acceptance. When people accept it, when they see this sort of racism or discrimination happening and they don't do anything about it, they don't take action, they don't fight against it, they don't speak out against it, they just accept it. And at that moment, that racism or discrimination might not be towards them, but it will eventually be towards them. Because if you don't say something when it happens to somebody else, when it happens to you, that person won't speak out for you. Don't think that person will stand up and say, oh, you know what, this person had my back when I was being discriminated against, now I'm going to have his back. It works both ways. And we can see this in the US currently with Donald Trump and the type of bigotry he's bringing out. I'm going to come to this side. Rayan, what's your thoughts on some of the causes?
I would say a lot of it has to do with pride. It could be that, I think I'm better than that person, therefore I'm allowed to look down at him. And, that could be the reason, pride. A lot of countries, especially Islamic countries, within it, internally, we see that, two different cities have racism against each other. A university in one city does not accept students from another city. So what comes to my mind is pride, and we know that the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that a person with a mustard seed of pride does not enter paradise. So pride is located in the heart, and so is taqwa. And pride is something that is spreading amongst Muslims, and of course we cannot blame the non-Muslims for having pride, because they don't even disbelieve in the Almighty Allah. They don't even believe in the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one main cause from my side would be pride.
And I think something that extends from pride is nationalism. And too much nationalism is no good, because what it does, people forget that they are citizens of this world. They're not citizens to a drawn, a drawn border on this earth. Rather, they're citizens to the whole earth. And what happens is that when you become so nationalistic, you forget that the person living right across that human-created line wants the same things in life as you. And you are just giving your allegiance to people that are ruling you, right? And they are doing the same. They're giving their allegiance to people that are ruling them, and those rulers just make those two parties, you and that other person living across the line, fight against each other. And to what extent? For what reason? There's no reason behind it. You want the same things in life. You want to have a family, you want to live your life, you want the freedom to worship, you want the freedom to a good life. That's all you want, and that's exactly what the next person wants as well. Mamadou, I'm going to come to you, if you can give us some of the causes that come to your mind.
I mean, thank you. You and Patrick both mentioned the media, but what I find, the media is only a result. We have to take a step back in that we are emerging in out of an era of imperialism and colonialism. And what can be seen on the face of history, one of the worst kind of subjugation of a people ever to happen, 400 years of black African slavery. So now what we see in the media today is only a result of what happened then. When we're looking at a country where in the last 200 years, which is the USA, black people were seen as a third of a human being. But that's what we're really looking at this time. So now, to undo those 400 years of subjugation of a people, it's not going to take 10, 20 years. So I feel like that is the main cause of why I have institutionalized racism, because we all know the main reason why the slavery happened against black people was because they thought they were superior. A white race thought they were superior to any other people, and that's how. And now, so then what you see today, so now, as Idris said, racism, you can't say I'm not hiring you because you're black, but now I'm going to make it as difficult as possible to not hire you. So that's what I think. And
that is the core of institutionalized racism, to make things difficult, or to put those barriers there without being blamed for not hiring that person. Let's speak about some of the institutionalized racism in government, for example, in health services. Maybe you can share some stories or anything that health services, housing, financial services in maybe Saudi Arabia or the US that you might have come across or that you think is there.
Okay, we hear of stories of people who cannot get, who cannot receive treatment in hospitals due to them being from a certain place or a certain location or a tribe, or due to, but this is all internal. I mean, you won't hear that this is the case on the news or in the media. This is all within themselves. Another example is that in schools, as I said earlier, a foreigner comes to USA, studies high school in one of their schools, in a public school, and the teachers look down at him or treat him differently due to his race or his color, or maybe even his accent. Another thing we could mention is the accent. So there are various things that relate to this, and there are many causes for it and solutions as well. Inshallah, throughout the talk we could possibly cover some solutions.
Yeah, we'll get to that inshallah towards the second segment of this program. Mamadou, I'm gonna come back to you inshallah, and I want to know what's your thoughts on institutionalized racism in the UK government, for example, in terms of housing, in terms of financial services. What's your thoughts on this?
I think it starts from university services. David Cameron, the Prime Minister of the UK, said in his last election cycle that if you have a foreign sounding name, you are less likely to get to university. And that's just the truth. If Bernie Sanders says recently, white and black people in the US use marijuana about the same. However, you are something like 12 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana use if you're black and go to prison for it. In the UK, if you are darker skinned, the judge is inclined to give you the harsher sentences. This is the reality of the UK today. This is 21st century UK, and there's no kind of hiding it. But the thing is, you have to look at who represents the UK. In the Parliament, House of Parliament UK, what you find is that you turn it on, and they're from the same group of people, from the same social class, from the same kind of, wage bracket. They're middle class, men usually, of English white men, above the age of 40, privately educated. And until that change, that's going to have a trickle effect. That's why, it's very interesting seeing the Prime Minister of Canada say, with his cabinet, finally a cabinet looks like Canada. I feel once you get representation, that's when things begin to change.
So you're saying that should be part of the solution, representation. Yeah. Okay, we're going to get back to that. I want you to hold your thought on that. Idris, I want to come to you and just get some thoughts on institutionalized racism in government services.
I think it happens, like they touched upon most of the main things that happen, but for instance, like he said, sentencing from judges. This is
criminal prosecution.
Statistics that everyone can look up. You don't even have to believe in them. Just go online. It's there for you. You'll find the disparity between the, same crime, same exact circumstances. This guy gets 30 years in prison and this one gets probation. It really is that far apart. I sound like I'm exaggerating, but it really isn't. It happens. This happens a lot.
But do you think the judges deliberately give those sentences to an individual of darker skin, or is it a bias that's been created in his subconscious and he just, when the guy comes in front of him, does he deliberately say, okay, this guy's darker, I'm going to give him the harsher sentence? Or is it something that he's so used to that, okay, this guy seems more dangerous, boom?
I think it could be a combination of both. You will find a racist judge who won't say anything, but and it's very difficult to prove that. But I think majority of them are looking at it as if this guy deserves it, in the sense of that, you know what, he's no good, and he comes from this background, and he look at his history, and they look at it as if he deserves it, not necessarily because he's consciously thinking, I'm going to get this guy, he's black, he's Hispanic. It's just that they feel like
that's created that this person deserves it.
He came from a background and he's never been any good. So they kind of look at it like, oh, this other person who he was coming from an Ivy League and he just made a mistake. He was at a party in the weekend and whatever. So they kind of like, oh, that's just give him a little break. This is why they actually had within the law recently, where they changed the law with this disparity because of the harsh sentencing, and they started giving people commute their sentences because of and getting rid of the mandatory minimums, because the mandatory minimums were destroying people. They were targeting certain crimes are committed by certain individuals usually, like, I hate to say it, but usually like in African American communities, they dealt in drugs as far as like crack. So they would make crack cocaine crimes extremely harsh. And the Caucasian communities would deal with powder cocaine, and they would make the punishment for powder cocaine very light, and don't worry. So this is a way they would do it in dealing with it.
Okay, that's interesting. So criminal prosecution, and that's one of the things we want to take a look at as well in further detail in terms of how we can remove this sort of institutionalized racism within criminal prosecution. Patrick, I'm going to come to you. What's your thoughts on government services and institutionalized racism?
Oh, well, yeah, in Slovenia.
Yes.
Yeah. I heard this thing on the news now that there's a lot of building sites in Slovenia. They have a lot of things being built. And they have lack of workers, the actual workers that need to do the work. So what they do is they would hire people that are from abroad, and most of them are darker skin. And they know that because they don't speak the language and they don't know the place, they would get them to work, and that they wouldn't give them salaries when they were supposed to get the salaries, because they know that they could be abusing them because they had nowhere to go. Because they paid for their transportation there, so in order to go back home, they need to pay them. And I constantly keep hearing that people are doing that, and the government isn't doing anything. Like, I'm watching the TV, I'm like, someone step up, but nobody wants to step up, because as soon as someone steps up, it's going to be like, he's going to be against all the others. So that's the problem. And there's the majority that most of them they think it's wrong, but some of people say like, yeah, you know, that it's okay. You know, that isn't me, so it's okay. But even the people that think that that's wrong, they don't want to step up because they know as soon as they step up and say something, they might, you know, because they might be in trouble or like something might happen to them because they're alone and they're gonna be against the entire majority that's silent and it's not talking. So I think that's when I was watching that on TV, I was really devastated, and that's not right.
Yeah. Would you like to add something?
Yeah, just a quick thing I left out I wanted to say was also, as far as like services is concerned, sometimes you'll see like for the poorer people, say for instance if it's like a black poor person who needs services, they'll make them go through so much to get the services. Like for instance, government assistance in certain things. And they want to drug test them, and they want to do this and that. They make it very difficult. And other people who maybe are of a different race who are favored, it's very easy for them. They're no problem. They just fill the paperwork out and then no problem.
Exactly. And just to add to that as well,
Yeah,
I would like to say that the common thread between Patrick and Idris is that darker skinned people, not saying black, but anyone who's darker skinned face these problems. And I feel like that is a part of social conditioning. It's part of stereotyping people. All black people are this. All Asian people are this. All brown people are, all Hispanic people are this.
Well, it works for whites as well. All white people are this.
Yeah, of course it works for stereotyping, but the thing is though, who's got the power? They say, I don't believe this personally, but they kind of say racism is prejudice plus power. To be able to enforce racism or to enforce discrimination, you have to have the power to do so. So.
Okay. Now, I want to speak about the dangers of state-sponsored racism, or you know, what are the dangers of it. But before I actually do that, I want to speak about Muslim countries practicing this sort of institutionalized racism. Now, we know commonly, you know, people come on and say, well, you know, Islam is the way of life and this is the right way to do things, and, you know, Islam removes racism. But you see in Muslim countries institutionalized racism being practiced to the highest levels in almost every single thing. And I know we can say, well, you know, Islam is safe, you know, Islam is not what the Muslims are, but why is it there that every single Muslim country, every single one, without the exception of almost any Muslim country, I don't even think there's an exception, practices this sort of institutionalized racism in all of their government institutions, and then expects people to believe that Islam is the right way and it removes racism and this is the way of life and this is how we should do things. What's your thoughts on this? Don't these two things contradict?
It could be widely spread due to people being far away from the fundamentals of the deen, the basics. I mean, you may see like the CEO of a company or the president praying Dhuhr, Asr with the staff and, you know, acting as if he has high faith. He probably does have high faith, but he just doesn't understand the fundamentals of the Islamic belief. I mean, I could give you an example of a time when I was working in an airline. I worked in an airline in Saudi Arabia. In a cargo company, and we had a CEO, a new CEO, who started hiring several VPs from UK. These VPs who came in from UK started taking over. They started hiring managers from UK also and from different parts of Europe, and they started bullying the staff, the Arabs within the organization. So the person to blame in this case is the CEO or the president, the one hiring these people, or the one establishing this act. And in most cases, it is possibly due to him being far away from the fundamentals. That's what I would say.
Okay. Before I move on to you, Mamadou, we're going to go for a short break. So as soon as we come back, we will continue our conversation on institutionalized racism, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Let's Talk. Now, before we took that short break, we were speaking about institutionalized racism, and specifically we were speaking about institutionalized racism in Muslim countries. So Mamadou, I'm going to start with you. What's your thoughts on this? Why is institutionalized racism so prevalent in Muslim countries?
I mean, for why it's so prevalent, I can go on forever, but I would like to start off, but I think government institutions are a microcosm. Look at the microcosms. So look at the masajid, for example. I remember an imam said, I mean, we hear the beautiful stories, but, you know, there's always Bilal. MashaAllah, there's Bilal. And someone said, one sheikh in the UK said, he's from the Pakistani community, he said that we have we have masajid called Masjid Bilal, but if Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anhu came to today, he couldn't be on the committee. And that's the reality of things. It's to do with education, social conditioning. I've heard of cases where, you know, people who are not Pakistani or from an Asian community trying to marry a woman from the Asian community. No, just not based on deen, on character, on job, based on his race alone. And that's the sickness that many Muslims have today. So when you have people like that who are in positions of power, that's the outcome we're going to have. Institutions, they're going to enforce that also then. Whether, and I feel, however, though, in a sense, Muslims are not to blame. In a sense, they are affected by colonialism. Colonialism affected many Muslim countries. And with the British and the Americans, they brought that with them. They brought that racism with them. I was recently looking into the Arab enslavement of black Africans. And I'm almost comfortable to say that initially the enslavement of the Arabs, slavery done by the Arabs was not done due to race initially. Because, you know, the word Slav, they say, comes from people who are actually fair-skinned. The original slaves of the Arabs were actually fairer-skinned. But what you find is when the British come in and America start enslaving people, it is based on race after that point. So I feel like the Arabs and the Muslims in general are affected by colonialism. That's what I think.
Okay, that's interesting. Idris, I'm going to come to you. What's your thoughts on this issue here?
For me, I think it has to do sort of a twofold thing, is that the people of power are totally out of touch with those who they have power over. They really there's a far disparity between what the reality is and where they are. There's no. It's like touching them with. You can't even touch them. As a matter of fact, they're totally out of sync with what reality is going on over what they're control over. And second, I think it has to also to do with the fact that anyone who has the wisdom to change it is persecuted for fear of these people of change. So if someone comes with a solution that sort of will help them, they're persecuted because they don't want change. They're comfortable with the way things are, and they don't have the masses of people behind them to support them to force the change through. So it's the people in charge who have their own agendas, and they don't have any touch with the reality, and also the people who are, you know, the ulama and the people, they can't approach it and say certain things because they're persecuted.
And I think sometimes people who are able to change it don't like certain systems to change because they will lose whatever benefits they're getting. So even if it may be something very small, like a parking spot. You know, this guy has a parking spot, and if he removes this, you know, top guy that's full of corruption, he's going to lose his parking spot. So he'd rather have his little parking spot than to remove this guy or speak out against him. And it literally works like that on larger scale issues as well. Patrick, I'm going to come to you to finish off this question. Muslim countries and institutionalized racism, why is it so prevalent?
Yeah, well, on that subject, I might actually add on something that actually happened.
Sure.
Yeah, well, my stepdad, he's Muslim, but he's an Egyptian, so he's a bit darker. And when we were in Slovenia, they have this Muslim community there. They had this. It's not a mosque. It's like a private house, but they go there, you know, for Jumu'ah prayer. And when my dad came in there, of course, all of the Muslims there were Bosnian, so they were white because of the community. When my dad stepped in there for the first time, and he's a bit darker, all the people will be looking at him and this. I'm not talking about the looks that are comfortable. No, they're the uncomfortable looks, like you know, you don't belong here. And it was Muslims, and it was Jumu'ah prayer. And I even remember when he was, because there was like two floors, and when we went up on the upper floor when the Imam was actually giving a khutbah, when he came in, the Imam paused for like 2 seconds to look at him, and everyone of course looked back because there was something there, and he continued as soon as they looked back because he didn't want to make it seem like he was shocked. And I think that was really bad because we're all Muslims, we're praying, and as soon as like someone comes in and he's from a different race but he's Muslim like you, he came here to pray Jumu'ah prayer, and still you're here listening to the words to relate it to Allah, and you're still doing it. Like it became so normal that you do it and you don't even know, you don't even notice. Like these people did it and they didn't even notice. So I think that I don't know. That was a really bad situation for me because I was standing right next to him. So people would be like, "Hey, so you brought him here?"
First-hand experience.
Yeah.
We don't have much time left, but I do want to address one more very important question, which is how can we as individuals get rid of, or actually begin to get rid of institutionalized racism? As individuals, what can we do to make a change? Mr. Rayan, I want to start with you.
Okay, the answer to this question, inshallah, is categorized under two. Number one, as individuals. Number two, as Muslims.
Okay.
As individuals, as in, Muslim and non-Muslim. Number one, to raise awareness. For me to raise awareness about this matter, for me to expose after speaking to them in private. If it doesn't work, to expose them positively and not negatively. And that will be a good solution for an individual, whether he's Muslim or non-Muslim. Secondly, for a Muslim, the same things added on to that is that he should be very patient to this, because we know the Prophet Muhammad went through difficult times in his lifetime. He was discriminated. People looked down at him from different tribes, especially the Jews when he moved to Medina. And one example of that is that they left their country and came to Medina so that they could follow the new common prophet. And when the prophet came, they said, "Oh no, he's Arab. We don't want him. We have nothing to do with him." But yet he dealt with that with patience, and he had tawakkul. So for the Muslim, that is to raise awareness, to advise, to expose, to be patient, and to have tawakkul. To know that if you rely on the Almighty Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, He's going to make for you a way out. And if you are pious to the Almighty Allah, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. He who is pious to the Almighty Allah, Allah makes for him an exit. وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. And He provides him from where he never expected. So a Muslim should be very patient and have tawakkul.
Very good, actually. Some very interesting points you mentioned there. Mamadou, I'm going to come to you. What are some of the points that come to your mind?
Immediately, I think it's recognizing that racism is a disease, first of all. And that, however, I'm very cautious of branding everyone as a racist. It's not everyone is a racist. I think there's a lot of ignorance. So, for example, people might not. And I feel a good thing is mixing people, mixing communities. Communities need to mix. In the UK, you have...
Yeah,
sorry.
That would go back to the point where he said you advise the people.
Yeah.
Maybe he's just ignorant of the fact that he's being a racist or he's discriminating. And then if he still continues this act, then you expose him. You say this person is doing such and such and this is unfair behavior. Continue.
Now in the UK, you have very common. This mosque is a Pakistani mosque. This mosque is a Nigerian mosque. This mosque is not a mosque of nationalities. It's a mosque that you're meant to go to worship Allah. So I think that's it's very interesting that names do play a big effect on things. If you stop saying this is a mosque for these kind of people, no, it's a mosque for Muslims. Full stop. Muslims are, Allah says we only made you from different tribes so that you may know each other. So I feel it starts with that, anyway.
Okay, that's a very good point you brought to the table here as well. Idris, I'm going to come to you, get some points from you, inshallah.
For me, I think they've touched on the basic main thing is and I agree that first of all, education and awareness is number one, because a lot of things are dispelled once a person understands and knows what's the reality of the situation. Many people have even become Muslim once they learned about Islam. I mean, a lot of people, they have these expectations and what they think Islam is, or they think Muslims are, or they think how black people are. And then when they meet someone, they're thinking, what was I thinking? So a lot of times this happens, it helps some people. And even if in this day and age, you think that it would be less, but it's still a lot of people who you'd be surprised are still in this category. And another thing would be, like he mentioned, integration. I mean, in theory, in America, it was supposed to have worked, and it worked somewhat. When it was separated before, they used to have different schools, different bathrooms, different. So they wanted to, in theory, the theory was correct that you should integrate because this will help kill it. Of course. Because
it helps you understand one another once you integrate. You get to see the person, live with them, go to school with them, so you say, why was I scared of this person?
But the problem is they need to continue to integrate and also educate at the same time. Because they integrated, and what happened? It created what we're talking about.
Yes.
Is this how it became? Oh, I can't do it openly, now I'm going to do it behind doors. So it has to be done on a more broader level and more, details need to be done and more worked out than just integrating alone. So it isn't just that by itself. I think those are the two main things: education awareness and integration.
Very interesting points. I'm going to recap all the points after I get Patrick's thoughts on this.
Yes. Well, individually, I think that all of us should. Yes. The most thing that we should focus on is education. That we start with the little ones, because they're the ones that are gonna, they're like a sponge. They take everything we teach them, and they grow up with it. Like they always used to tell me, like, the things you learn, like the first few years of your life, you're gonna remember those for like the rest of your life, and that's how you grow up and the things around you. So I think we should start in education, and yes, like they said, we should let them live together, they know each other and live together. Because I had a lot of friends in school, and they were darker than me, but they were my best friends. Like they were much better than most of my other friends that I had in Slovenia, to be honest. And complete honesty, when I got to know them, when I came to Egypt, I had an all different image in my head, and we should all start with ourselves. Like we have a lot of Web 2.0 social media, and there's a lot of communities where you can go and join and put a voice there. Just press like. It's not a lot of effort, but it makes a difference. When you see 1,000 people doing the same thing you're doing, and they're against this racism thing, and if you see a 10,000 or a million, you feel better, because people care. Like it's not a lot of effort, but people actually went there and they care, and they put a comment, or they put like a picture or share a story. But when you do that, you spread awareness. Some people that didn't know, and they go read and they think about it. Oh yeah, that is happening, and we should do something about that. So I think that education and awareness, we should work on that.
Could I just add that?
Yeah, of course.
Arguably, the Prophet ﷺ, one of the main missions was to establish justice, and I feel like Muslims should be at the forefront of this. We shouldn't let, an example is the Black Lives Matter in the US. A lot of many Muslim imams are very silent on the issue. I think Muslims need to be at the forefront of these issues and tackling racism.
Yes, that's the whole point of being a Muslim, to establish justice and to promote fairness and justice on earth. Now, just to recap some of the things that we said in terms of the ways that we can help get rid of institutionalized racism as an individual, I have here raise awareness and education. I mean, it starts there. If you guys would like to add anything throughout this, you can. Advise people. So if you see somebody doing something that is in reality, a type of discrimination against another person, then you advise that person. Maybe he doesn't know, maybe he's not aware of what he's doing, and if he still continues this, like Rayan said, you then expose this person that he's doing such and such, and this needs to be taken care of by whoever's responsible. The next thing is to recognize the discrimination that is there. So if we turn a blind eye, nobody's going to know that. It's just going to carry on, and the system just continues unless somebody speaks up against it. And as Muslims, we should be at the forefront of this. We should be the ones speaking up against this. Integration, like Idris brought into this discussion. And I'd like to add learning about others for the sake of understanding, and to actually care about why this person does something. And it's very important, because when you care for others, they want to care for you. It's just human nature. And with that being said, I mean, we're out of time, so I'm going to thank you guys for joining me here on the panel. Thank each and every one of you guys. It was a wonderful conversation I had. Dear viewers, I hope you guys enjoyed today's conversation. Don't forget to join us for next Let's Talk on Monday, and check out our Facebook page, our YouTube channel. And until then, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.